Tonight, we're going to get into the obstacle to worship. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 11. What's it say? I'm sorry, verse 21. Little children, keep yourselves from idols. There's a lot packed into that word. What I'd like to do is kind of look at some specific instances in the Bible where we read about idolatry and what it means, and then make application for today to find out what does it mean for us, because it's in a different form really today than it used to be. So let's start with the old law. Exodus chapter 20. What does God say about idolatry, either explicitly or implicitly, there in the Ten Commandments chapter?
Verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. Verse 4, you shall not make carved images, any likeness in heaven and earth, and on the Lord. Verse 5, you shall not bow down to them nor serve them. Verse 23, you shall not make for yourself gods of silver or gold.
They had been in Egypt for so long. This is all they knew, right? They had no idea in Egypt about monotheism to the extent they were about to learn. Because all the Egyptians were worshiping the sun god and worshiping this god and that god, and Pharaoh himself was a god to the Egyptian people. So the Hebrews, as wrong as it is, the culture influenced how they saw God. Here you have two commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. God is God. He is the only God. And any other God is not a real God. And then verse 4. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. He repeats this later in the chapter, verse 23. We are to have nothing but God Himself, before which we bow down. Idolatry is man's effort to get God or gods into a form whereby he may be known through one of the senses. See, touch, particularly those two. But God is a spirit, right? John chapter 4, verse 24, that's what Jesus says. Therefore, any attempt to get God in some material form is a rejection of the very nature of God. Now let's go one more verse. What is the next commandment? Okay, after that. Usually called the third commandment, before the Sabbath day. Verse 7. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. This is more than just using His name as a curse word. That's bad enough, but this is even more than just that. That's included. Using God's name flippantly, irreverently, should always be avoided by His children. But if we limit it to only that, we miss the bigger picture. God's name is a means of identifying His reality. Talking or taking God's name in vain is a reflection on His existence or our attitude towards His existence. We can't do that. We must revere God which includes revering His name. Any other thoughts or points that you want to make from chapter 20? Yeah. Yeah. God is to be supreme. I often think about, this is kind of related, Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. That means you are to have God above everything else in your life, but more than that, it means you are to have God as a part of everything in your life. If you have to separate God and put Him in the corner while you go off and do this other thing, you shouldn't be doing this other thing. He needs to be a part of it, and if it's something that He can't be involved in, guess what? We can't either. We need to take Him seriously. Let's go to Exodus 32. Exodus 32. What did the people do while Moses was on Mount Sinai receiving the law from God?
We don't know what happened to Moses after so many days. So they asked Aaron to make them gods to go before them. So people gave Aaron the gold earrings, and he made the golden, he molded the golden calf for them to worship. Then he designated a feast day for people to offer burnt peace offerings to the golden calf. And at the end of the story, is God knows what was going on and sent Moses down, and he had the Levites go around and kill 3,000.
Yeah. We don't know what happened to Moses. We can't see him anymore, right? We can't hear him anymore. Our leader, he may have been eaten by a wild beast. Make us a God to lead us. We don't make gods. God made us. We can't create what created us. Aaron creates the idol. He built the altar. He proclaimed a feast. He offered sacrifices. Have you ever thought about how this person did this? He makes this golden calf, molds it out of melted gold, and says, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." This was Aaron that we're talking about. The one who witnessed the plagues as Moses' spokesman. He went before Pharaoh with Moses. The eventual high priest was involved in the golden calf, was involved in building the altar, proclaiming the feast, offering these sacrifices. And then he compounded. What? Go ahead. Yeah. Was he afraid for his life? Maybe. Maybe it was a nagging situation.
Well,
Yeah.
you have to put this in perspective. They hadn't had the Ten Commandments
Right.
and all this. So we don't know how much guidance they were given. We know they knew about God, and he take care of his people. But I don't know how much stipulation there was and things they could or could not do. Obviously, they should have known there's only one God.
Yeah.
And they all were brought up, even though they were
And while they were brought up and taught the Hebrew ways, remember, culture had a major impact on them in Egypt. And Aaron was there in Egypt. He wasn't with Moses in Midian. He was in Egypt. And so we don't know exactly how much he stuck with the Hebrew teachings while he was there. So it's not an excuse, but it might give us some insight into how it happened, how he got on this train of thought that was way off the rails.
Well, it shows it kind of leads into like a what's it called? Crowd has so much influence.
Mob mentality. Yeah.
They told him, they basically came here and said, do something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know that they asked him. Because the way it reads is, we don't know where Moses is. You need to do this. Right? Make this for us. So, I don't want to be too hard on Aaron, but at the same time, we understand what he did was wrong, right? We do need to understand what he did was wrong, but there may have been an understandable reason in his mind for doing it.
It's amazing that he wasn't one slain.
True. Yeah. Yeah. And you see how he compounded his sin too. When Moses came down, Moses calls it a sin in verse 21, a great sin in verse 30. But look at verse 24. Aaron lied about what happened. He did not deny that the people requested to God. He did not deny that it was a wicked request. He admitted that he told them to give him their gold to melt it down. And so they gave it to me, verse 24, and I cast it into the fire, and this calf came out. Come on. So Moses calls this a sin, a great sin. It's not just a mistake. It's not just a lack of judgment. It was sin, and sin separates man from God. And there are consequences to sin. As Robin pointed out, verses 33 through 35, the Lord said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. Now therefore go, lead the people to the place of which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sins. So the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made.
Didn't Aaron and Miriam later on stand up against Moses?
Yeah, we see that in Exodus.
One of them made it into the promised land.
Right.
They died.
Yeah. I think we read about that in Numbers. Is where we read about their rebellion against Moses. Yeah. All right, let's go over to Deuteronomy 7. Deuteronomy 7. What were God's instructions concerning idolatry as the children of Israel came in to possess the land that God had given them? Don't make any covenants with them. Don't show them mercy. Do not make marriages with them. Destroy their altars. Break down their sacred pillars. Cast down their wooden images. And burn their carved images with fire. God wanted them to wipe the false gods completely out of the land, to the point that there was no evidence they had ever even been there. Don't compromise with idolaters at all. Why not?
Because they can't marry the think Solomon's an excellent example of that. How many wives did he have from other nations, and they all tried to.
Right. Solomon is the most prominent example of that. That's true. But there are other examples. If you study throughout the historical books, you'll see it happening a number of times. God wanted them to be holy. His holy people, and they could not be if they got stuff mixed up with the idolaters and idolatry. He wanted them to remain His special treasure above all the peoples on the earth. They could not retain that status if they worshiped idols. How about in the prophetic books? How does Isaiah demonstrate the lack of an idol's power in chapter 46, verses 6 and 7 of his book?
It does not move from its place. It cannot answer you if you ask it a question. And it cannot deliver him from his distress.
Can't do anything, can it? You have to pick up your idol and carry it with you because he can't move himself. Man has to make the idol to begin with. How can something like that have any power? An idol is absolutely helpless. How can a helpless God help anyone else? Isaiah 44 verse 10 it says, "Who would form a god or mold an image that profits him nothing?" There are several other passages in Isaiah that talk about idolatry. Isaiah 40 verses 18 through 20, Isaiah 41:7, chapter 44 verses 9 through 20, 46 verses 1 and 2. The psalmist also speaks about the futility of idols fashioned by men. Let's turn there and read that passage. Psalm 115, verses 4 through 8. Would anyone like to read that for us? Psalm 115, verses 4 through 8.
Their idols are quivering rubble, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. Eyes they have, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. Noses, but they have, but they do not smell. They have hands, but they do not handle. Feet they have, but they do not walk. Tongues they have for them. Their food and others who can throw. Those who make them are like them, so is everyone who trusts them.
An idol has everything that man created it for. Remember what we said? What is the point of making an idol? To be able to see God, to sense Him through those five senses. And here the psalmist runs through the five senses plus more. And talks about how they have all those things. Eyes and ears and noses and mouths and hands and feet. But they can't do anything with them. Even though they have the things that are connected to the five senses, they don't have any sense at all, and neither do the people who made them. That's what he says in verse 8. Those who make them are like them. So is everyone who trusts in them. Jeremiah, sometimes called the weeping prophet, because of his deep love for Israel and incessant pleas for their return to the truth, he boldly identified Israel's problem with God's and the consequences of idolatry. Somebody read chapter 1, verse 16.
I will utter my judgments against them concerning all their wickedness, because they have forsaken me, burned incense to other gods, and worshipped the works of their own hands.
How does God view idolatry? It's wickedness. It is a form of forsaking God. The gods of men have no power to produce purity of heart, purity of life. Listen to the word of Jehovah from Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 8 through 10. Behold, you trust in lying words that cannot profit. Will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, burn incense to Baal, and walk after other gods whom you do not know, and then come and stand before me in this house which is called by my name, and say we are delivered to do all of these abominations? Are you hedging your bets, trying to worship these other gods and then worship me too? I'm not going to accept it. You can't do both. You have to make a choice. You have to make the right choice if you don't want to suffer the consequences. The immorality of men and the impotency of the gods of men is on full display in the book of Jeremiah. People could have known the true God who made the earth by his power and established the world by his wisdom and stretched out the heavens at his discretion. They could have feared the Lord God, who gives rain both the former and the latter in its season. They could have known God because he had given his word to Israel. But the word of the Lord is a reproach to them. They have no delight in it. They did not know God because they would not know God. They didn't care to know the true God of heaven and earth because they were devoted to the gods of earth. Any other thoughts on idolatry in the Old Testament before we turn the page to the New? All right. Let's look at the practical part in the New Covenant. Something that they were dealing with in Corinth. Paul addresses a specific situation. In 1 Corinthians chapter 8, can a Christian eat meat that had been used in idol worship? Why or why not?
Yes, but.
Exactly.
However,
That's correct.
Food itself does not make us better or worse than God's eyes. However, a weak brother who believes it's wrong in their opinion to eat meat offered to an idol cause them to stumble in their faith if other Christians eat it. So, with that, if we make our brother stumble, with our action, we're also guilty of sin.
Exactly. Don't allow your liberty to cause another to sin. Right? They had to be very careful about eating meats which had been used in the worship to idols. Now, God's people, those who were the stronger, the more mature, they knew that an idol is nothing in the world and there's none other God but one. But not all people had this knowledge. And if by eating that meat, which was used in idol worship, weak Christians might conclude that God's people were honoring the false god. In that case, it is necessary to not eat that meat, because the conscience of the weak brother might be wounded, and it might lead him to accept idolatry. There's nothing wrong with the meat itself. It's bought at a marketplace. It was used up at the temple, then brought down here at the marketplace for profit. It's just meat. But if a person knows it was used in idol worship, there can be a confusion. And it can lead a weaker brother into sin.
Not usually the problem here.
Right.
In the U.S. Overseas, too.
Yeah. That particular scenario is not a problem here in the U.S. Back in the earlier 20th century, I don't even know how early, gambling was rampant. It is now again, but back when they had all the speakeasies and the illegal poker games and the back rooms and all of those things, and so a lot of religious people said, we're not going to have anything to do with playing cards, face cards. And if you bring a face card to a church party, you're in trouble. You must be in league with those gamblers. That's kind of on the same level as what we're talking about here. Because it's violating the conscience of those who believe that those playing cards are going to lead others to sin. We need to be careful with the liberty. There's nothing wrong with playing cards. You don't gamble with them, but the cards themselves, there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with eating meat. You don't go up to the temple and sacrifice it to the idols with the pagans. But there's nothing wrong with the meat itself to eat it. But we've got to be careful that we don't offend the conscience of another Christian, the weaker brother. Does that make sense? Now, we can go too far with it. We need to be careful that we don't go too far with it.
How far can we go to accommodate someone just to keep from offending them? There's a line.
Well, okay, let's define the word offend. By the word offend, I'm not saying make them feel bad.
When we all agree that there's nothing wrong with the deck of cards.
Right.
How long are we going to go pulling out the base cards to keep from offending that particular person? And how far?
Yeah.
How many other things do we accommodate to keep from offending that person?
Right. So, okay.
There's a line. There's a line.
By offend, I'm not saying just make them upset. By offend, it means to cause them to stumble. To say, well, there's nothing wrong with playing cards, I'm going to go down to the casino. That's where the line is drawn. If it leads them to sin, if eating the meat leads them to go up to the idolatrous temple and sacrifice, then it's wrong. If using a deck of cards causes one to go to the casino, because there's nothing wrong with a deck of cards, so it must be okay to gamble. There's a teaching situation that needs to happen there. We need to take the opportunity to teach what is wrong with gambling and how it is different than just playing a friendly game of Scottish bridge, where there's no gambling involved, right? You need to be able to teach. You need to be able to explain. But we don't cause them to sin. We don't allow them to believe that if there's nothing wrong with that, then there's nothing wrong with this, and so on and so on. You need to teach why there is nothing wrong with that, but there is still something wrong with this. Okay? So use the teaching situations. I'm not saying don't ever pick up a deck of cards again. I'm saying use the situations to teach where we have those opportunities.
I haven't run into anyone unless they're
That's an old time example. It's not really a problem today that I'm aware of. Yeah, that's an old time example. So, when you were young, okay. So that's how Rook came to be. The game Rook, because they wanted to create a deck of cards that didn't have face cards in it, and so it's a different type of card. It's not used in gambling. Things like that.
Uses face cards in poker, right?
Huh?
Only poker uses face cards, too.
I'm not sure.
Say you done that? I don't know.
Yeah.
What's wrong?
It's a different game. I'll teach you sometime. This class is not sponsored by Parker Brothers. Mike.
Gambling itself was not wrong, but the lying it creates, stealing in the game is what sinful part.
Okay. There are some deeper principles involved in gambling. I'm not prepared to go into that tonight. That was just an example for the class. If you have YouTube, go to World Video Bible School and look up Don Blackwell's lesson on gambling. He does a good job talking about it and some of the biblical principles that are violated by gambling. Okay? All right. Any other questions before we continue? All right. There are certain things that are not sinful in and of themselves, but participation in those things could cause another to sin. And causing your brother to sin, putting that stumbling block in front of them, makes those things something we should not be involved in. Let's bring it a little bit closer to home, though. Paul says, flee idolatry. He warns that idolaters will not inherit the kingdom of God. John says, keep yourselves from idols. Peter includes abominable idolatries among the will of the Gentiles. Christians must avoid those things. Now, we don't see altars to Baal when we're walking down the street now. We don't have a temple of Athena or a temple of Diana. So why warn against idolatry in the 21st century? What can become an idol for us today? Give me some scriptures too.
Anything that comes between us and God. It could be material things, it could be sports, going to a sporting game instead of coming to worship. Just your neighbor, you envy him or something they have and you just got to have it. That causes us to put a separation between us and God. I think Barbara had a better scripture. All I have is Galatians 5:19-21, which talks about the works of the flesh.
Okay.
Deals with it.
Okay.
I put Colossians 3:5.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
Revelation 9:20, which describes those who still worship idols as a sin.
Okay. Okay. As Robin pointed out, anything that can substitute for God, anything that we put above or ahead of God, modern people, usually we think of an idol as an animal or a human figure made of stone or wood. We see it as an object for religious devotion, magical power for pre-modern people who might prostrate themselves on the ground before it. But idols are not just on those pagan altars. They are in the well-educated human hearts and minds. The Apostle Paul associates the dynamics of human greed, lust, craving, and coveting with idolatry. It may not involve explicit denials of God's existence or his character, and it may come in the form of an over-attachment to something that in and of itself is perfectly good. An idol can be a physical object. It can be a property, a person, an activity, a role, an institution, a hope, an image, an idea, a pleasure, a hero, anything that can substitute for God. Money, possessions, an everlasting standard of ever-rising standard of living. For some, love has become the all-powerful force at a cosmic level. Others worship progress as all glorious and inevitable. These gods, also known as chance or good luck or fate, can also deliver the illusion of coherence and meaning in the universe. Nearby gods can be health, diet, fitness, or the body beautiful culture pursued with obsessional zeal. Family can become an idol. It is important to honor one's family, to take care of one's family. Ephesians 5:25 through 28 talks about that marriage relationship. Ephesians 6:1 through 4 talks about the relationship between children and parents. 1 Timothy 5:8 emphasizes the importance of taking care of your own. Yet we must never place family above God. Luke 14:26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Simply put, you cannot place anyone above God and be acceptable to God. Money is a big one too. Matthew 6:24. Jesus says no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one, love the other, or be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Don't put your confidence in wealth. Trust God. Colossians 3:5, which Barbara brought out. I bring that one up a lot. Covetousness, which is idolatry. But look at the overall passage in the context. I may have been limiting the scope of it too much. Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. What's the problem that Paul addresses here? Roger talked about it last week in his devotional. It's an improper focus. We have to set our sights on the right thing, not on the wrong things of verse 5. Seek those things which are above, where Christ is. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. If your focus is in the right place, then you will put to death your members which are on the earth. All of the lust and the wickedness and the covetousness, which is idolatry. Does that phrase, which is idolatry, apply only to covetousness, or is fornication and wickedness and passion and evil desire also included? If those things come between you and God, they become more important than God. If they take your attention away from God, then yes, they are idolatry. So it remains a problem. What do we often hear? Follow your heart, right? Now, about following God's heart instead. Our hearts are deceitful. They mislead us. Follow God's heart. There is no question but that God is just as insistent in the new covenant as he was for those under the old covenant, that his people recognize the danger of idolatry, the seriousness of idolatry, and that they reject idolatry. The gods of men keep people from truly worshiping the true God. All right, 2 weeks, we'll talk about the principle of worship. Next week, singing night.